and happy November. We all have those books on our shelves that have been collecting dust for way too long because either they're super chunky, or we're just not in the mood to read them, or we're just intimidated by the content that are within the pages of these books. So starting off with a classic, it is The Once and Future King. Everybody, at least once in their movies, quotes The Once and Future King. Even the X-Men quote The Once and Future King by T.H. White. I believe that Tolkien read this while making his own version of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. I've always been a fan of Arthurian legend, and Arthurian legend is actually what got me into reading to begin with, and I've always wanted to read it, but I've just never found a good way to start. And I've heard like this is widely the way to read the King Arthur events. There's even another book called The Book of Merlin that I have that is the prequel, or at least like the sequel prequel to this, but I just haven't sat down to read it because I'm so intimidated by the contents of this book. This little tiny book that's about as big as my head, has 635 pages in it, which may not sound like a lot to a seasoned reader, but I've just really begun my reading journey here. I haven't really read anything unless it was for school, or I would have just read one book a year. So this book I'm very intimidated by because of those reasons, because it's a classic. Everybody quotes from this book. It's long, and I'm not even sure about the prose. Like, look at how thick these pages are. These pages are thick with prose and words in it. I'm just extremely intimidated by this book. So the next one is also following in Arthurian legend, and that is The Mists of Avalon. I have had this copy of The Mists of Avalon for about 8 years. Normally, The Mists of Avalon comes in a smaller book. I have another edition that I have in my Pango bookstore that I picked up. It is also a paperback as well. This book is almost 900 pages long. It's about 860 pages. And this chonker is thick. Like, this is a huge edition, and these are the contents in the pages. Just thick. We're in the thick of it right here. I know that everybody says, like, the thicker the book, the better. This book intimidates me because it's an older retelling of the Knights of the Round Table, the life of King Arthur, but it's told by all of the women in his court. So there's the Lady of the Lake, there's Morgan Le Fay, there's Guinevere. This entire book is told by the perspectives of all of those women around him, which normally isn't my speed when it comes to reading fantasy books, but everyone says this is a classic along with The Once and Future King. So my goal is at least to work my way through this and the Book of Merlin at some point in the future, and I think I really want to challenge myself in the coming year to actually read these books because they've been sitting on my shelf for so long and I really want to read them, and I've just been super intimidated by just the sheer size of these books. So one of the books that I've had on my shelf for a very long time is The Journal of the Plague Year. I picked this up in 2020 because I had a fascination with the Black Death for obvious reasons, and I just wanted to know what pandemics were like and how we got to where we were today. So this book is semi-fictional and semi-realistic, if that makes any sense. Like, it takes real situations that happened in history and they dramatize it. This book was actually written in 1695, and of course there's been translations of it and everything, and it just goes through the Black Death and the Great Plague, as it says in the back here, and what it was like during the claiming of 100,000 lives across all of Europe. I would love to read this. I haven't had the most success with, like, history books in general. As you can see, these pages are just thick. They're just chocked full of information. I'm just intimidated by just the chocked full book. The next book that I have was a book that I've had on my list since last year. This is The Pariah. The second book in this series is already out. I cannot remember what it's called, so forgive me. This is a grimdark fantasy, and I love grimdark. I love things like The Witcher. I'm starting to get into a Game of Thrones. I've also read like halfway into The Kings of the Wild, which I wouldn't exactly consider grimdark, but there are some situations in that book that would be considered grimdark, if that makes any sense. This book is about a thief named Alwyn, and Alwyn is raised by a band of warriors, and that's pretty much all I know about this book. There are a couple of YouTubers that I know that have read this book and loved it, and that's part of the reason why I want to read it, because I want to start getting into the chunkier fantasy books. Fanny books. Whew. Maybe it's just the sheer size of it. This book isn't necessarily a long one. It is about 561 pages, at least for this edition right here. It is just chocked full of just words and words and words and prose. And that stuff really intimidates me. I think it's mostly because I'm dyslexic, and I may be listening to a chunk of this on audio, or I may buy it on my Kindle and try and break it up that way. But this book scares me because it's bigger than me. It's bigger than my face. The last book, or it's really a series that I've had on my TBR for years at this point. I had the first book for a little bit, and then spilled grape soda on it, and then had to get myself a new edition of it. And it is the Outlander series. I have the books leading up to the Fiery Cross. I know that there are a lot more in this series besides that. This book is so widely beloved just as a historical fiction book, and it scares me because I want to love it. I started the TV series and found it was really slow moving, which is not a bad thing. I watched through the entirety of Downton Abbey. I love historical fiction. I've watched Poldark, and I want to read through that story. I've also watched North and South. I love historical fiction. I also love Jane Austen. So this book series kind of intimidates me because, again, it's chunky, and every book only gets bigger from here. The first book, maybe this is just the edition that I picked up. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I'm just picking up the wrong editions. But this book has 850 pages in it, and again, is just... Look at how small that font is. That font is so small. Like, I could definitely sit here and read it like this, but just the amount of words that are on the page at once just scares me. I might hybrid read this. I might do it on audio and read through Kindle and stuff, but I've also heard that these are really quick reads, so I'm not sure. That's going to conclude the books that intimidate me. I want to at least plan on reading most of these, if not all of them, next year. Let me know what books you guys are intimidated by, and maybe we can read some of these together. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe and like, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!